Right, let's go.
Now, you said she was a bit groggy on Sunday.
Yeah, and then about 6 o'clock, we noticed a bit of a rash.
It's because we've all had flu, and we thought she was groggy. We thought she had flu, yeah.
The most difficult job is those of the general practitioners who are out there in the community, because the symptoms can be so vague and non-specific in its early stages.
The disease spreads rapidly. You can go from having a child who's slightly unwell to a child within hours who's in multi-system failure, whose every system in the body is failing.
And meningococcal infection now is the biggest killer of previously healthy children due to infection in the UK.
We go out as quick as we can to get intensive care to these children as quick as possible to give them the best chance of survival, because without proper treatment, a lot of these children would die.
Last year in Britain, 3,000 people were struck down by a bacterial infection that continues to defeat doctors and scientists. It's commonly known as meningitis. This is the meningococcal bacteria that's responsible. If it enters the bloodstream, it can kill within hours. Over the last 10 years, new research has unraveled some of its complexities, but the virulence of this bacteria makes it a tough challenge.
I can't think of any other life-threatening infection that can spread so rapidly. It is truly amazing. These are children who almost invariably in the preceding 24, 48 hours have been completely well. These are children who've been running around, who've been swimming, who've been playing, who've been at school. And 24, 48 hours later, they're on an intensive care unit with each of their systems being supported.
Well, medical science has been enormously successful in countries such as the United Kingdom in eliminating infectious disease. We are not familiar with infectious disease. In other countries in the world, in other periods of history, infectious disease of this type was very, very common. It's very uncommon now. And so the meningococcus stands out as an infectious disease that's difficult to combat. It's difficult to combat because it's difficult to make a vaccine, and also because of the rapidity with which the disease develops. It can become fatal before we can go in with medical interventions.
6.
She got a rash.
Sorry, tell a lie.
She got a rash.
Yeah, she's got quite a significant rash.
This rapid response team from St Mary's Hospital in London takes specialist intensive care to children who are critically ill at their local hospital. Dr. Ivan Dillon and his team are on their way to High Wycombe, where a teenager is seriously ill.
This is a 16-year-old girl who presented to High Wycombe a couple of hours ago with all the signs of meningococcal septicaemia. She has been unwell off and on for most of the month with coughs and colds, but has had a cough and cold significantly for about 48 hours, and then has developed a headache and pains, rash, and I say they noticed this morning the rash was really quite significant, non-blanching rash on the hands and arms, and that's when the parents brought her into casualty.
Every minute that passes without treatment is crucial. 1 in 5 patients with meningococcal septicaemia will die.
Braking. The time is 16:14. Just under half an hour. Hi there.
Hello.
Who have we got?
Hi, I'm Ivan, the doctor.
Excellent.
Siobhan and Helen.
I'm Yvonne, Mrs. Helen.
Hiya. Mum.
This is Mum, yes.
How'd you do, Mum? I'm one of the doctors.
Hi.
Well, I'm going to have a quick look and just see what's going, get the story, and I'll come and have a chat with you.
This is Pauline, who was basically, she had quite a severe viral infection in early December. There was a GP investigator.
Pauline's been sedated by the local team.
Was quite well until 2 days ago, when she basically developed a runny nose, a sore throat, and basically became increasingly unwell during the course of the day. Started to develop a mild headache last night. It started to feel increasingly worse generally this morning. With time the noticed during the course of the morning a characteristic rash appearing.
Meningococcal septicemia is caused by the same germ that causes meningitis. It's less easy to detect. Early signs like fever, aching limbs, cold hands and feet are easily mistaken for flu. By the time Pauline's symptoms became obvious, the bacteria were threatening her life.
It was uneventful.
You saw her about 1?
I saw her at 1.
Right, has the rash extended at all since then?
I thought possibly the rash over the ankle is expressed, but basically it seemed to be static. That was my clinical impression, but it was really the persistently poor perfusion that was my primary concern. It was really a primarily septic picture.
Sorry, can I just have a quick look at her feet? Sorry, Pauline, I'm just going to slip your sock off down here. These are the classic meningococcal purpura on the ankle here.
Pauline has one of the clearest signs of meningococcal disease, a rash underneath her skin.
Sorry, Pauline, just slipping the other sock off here.
The numbers back.
The rash isn't really a spot as such, it's a little bruise caused by the blood leaking out of these small blood vessels in the skin that are being damaged by the disease process. But it's happening throughout the whole body, in every organ and every tissue base in the body. The same thing is happening, and you're getting these little hemorrhages, these little bruises in all your organs as well. And that's what's causing a lot of the damage with meningococcal septicemia and meningitis.
The bacteria first entered Pauline's bloodstream probably just hours ago. Meningococcal bacteria are found in the throat, where they can live without causing any harm. No one knows why or exactly how they do it, but sometimes the bacteria break through the lining of the throat and get into the bloodstream. Damage to the throat from flu and other infections could make people more vulnerable. Swept along in Pauline's bloodstream, the bacteria reproduce at a dramatic rate. Once harmless, they're now deadly. They double in number every 30 minutes, becoming millions in just hours, enough to make Pauline's condition critical.
She has been to a party where there's been sort of predictable close contact. But that's community health, public health are involved.
So they've been involved?
They are.
Prophylaxis for the family?
Rifampicin. Yeah.
Great.
She had 600 micrograms.
Pauline is now on full life support.
150 succinylmethonium, a small dose of atracurium, and she just had an additional dose of vecuronium, which as soon as it was available.
Are we giving her anything to
give her sleep? She's had some morphine. I believe she's had a couple of incremental doses of midazolam.
She's on some isoflurane as well. Okay, lovely.
So we're most grateful to you.
No problem at all.
Fortunately, the team at Wickham Hospital have recognised Pauline's symptoms and responded quickly.
Any delay in getting effective treatment gives the bacteria a chance just to take hold, and that can, invariably be fatal if there's a significant delay.
Give us 5 minutes, and then yes.
There you go. Pauline, sorry, I'm just going to be having a look in the back of your eyes here.
The bacteria may have infected the lining around Pauline's brain.
Okay, Pauline, now the other one. You just relax for me. What I'm doing is looking at the back of the eye, the retina of the eye. The optic nerve, which is the only nerve in the body you can actually see. You can see as it attaches to the retina, and that gives us an idea. It's the only sort of basically part of the nervous system in the brain that you can see. So what I'm actually looking for is any swelling around that, which will give us an indication if there's any swelling in the brain. And it's nice and clear.
Once meningococcal bacteria are in the bloodstream, they can cause 2 life-threatening conditions: septicemia and meningitis. In meningitis, the bacteria damage delicate blood vessels in the lining around the brain known as the meninges. They break through to infect the fluid surrounding the brain and running into the spinal cord. The bacteria continue to reproduce and release lethal toxins. The meninges in the brain start to swell, and the pressure causes damage to essential nerves, which can be fatal. Survivors may be left with permanent brain damage, such as deafness. The other deadly infection, septicaemia, is severe blood poisoning, which affects the whole body. The meningococcal bacteria multiply rapidly in the bloodstream and again release toxins, causing damage to the body's vital organs that can be fatal within hours. Pauline could have meningitis, septicaemia, or both. The choice of treatment is critical. If Pauline has septicaemia, she must be given additional fluids. If she has meningitis, too much fluid will exacerbate any swelling in her brain. Her treatment is a balancing act.
So you're treating septicemia as opposed to meningitis?
We're treating, yeah, all the treatment here is aimed at septicemia, but what we'll be constantly aware of the fact that you can get a mixed picture, so we're keeping an eye on the brain, looking for swelling in the brain and keeping an eye for signs for that as well, because we don't want to go down one treatment line and miss anything else that's happening, so we keep an eye for both things at the same time. Hello there. How do you do? My name's Angel. I'm one of the doctors from St Mary's. Okay, right. Now, I just wanted to come and introduce myself and just have a little chat about what we think's going on and what our plans will be from here. Okay. Just a few questions first of all. Pauline's 16, I believe. Is that right? And apart from a few coughs and colds in the last couple of months, she's otherwise fit and well.
This has just started Sunday evening. She had a runny nose.
Right.
Monday she woke up, she was shivering and she had a headache, a bit of a temperature, and she's had nothing to eat because she was reaching. And that's about it, really.
Right. And then you noticed the rash today?
Yes, this morning when she woke up.
Pauline's got a condition caused by the bug that causes meningitis. It looks more like something called meningococcal septicaemia, which is like a kind of blood poisoning caused by the meningitis bug. It is a serious condition, okay, and that's why we're here. And we're only going to go into the ambulance when I'm happy that she's in the best condition for travelling in the ambulance. Okay. But feel free to wander in.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in a bit.
Thanks for all you do.
No problem at all. Sorry, Pauline. Here we go.
Despite the team's efforts, Pauline remains in a precarious state. The bacteria is a formidable force, with an incredibly effective means of spreading its toxins around her body. Every meningococcal bacteria is surrounded by a slimy outer coat that contains a poisonous chemical called endotoxin. As the bacteria multiply and move through Pauline's bloodstream, they shed greasy bubbles known as blebs from these outer coats. The blebs contain concentrated amounts of the poisonous endotoxin and also act as decoys, confusing the body's immune system. The endotoxin targets the heart, affecting its ability to pump, and also causes blood vessels throughout the body to leak. As every vessel starts to hemorrhage, major organs like the lungs and kidneys are damaged, and they shut down. The bacteria can be killed easily with antibiotics. As soon as the doctors suspected meningococcal disease, Pauline was given a large dose of antibiotics in the form of penicillin. As the penicillin flows through her bloodstream, it kills all the meningococcal bacteria instantly. But the penicillin cannot destroy the blebs that contain the lethal endotoxin. In fact, as the bacteria are killed, they release even more blebs, which makes the problem worse. Flowing through every blood vessel in Pauline's body, the blebs continue to cause serious damage.
0.5 millimoles and you want to leave, put it over an hour.
Yeah, so we may be leaving before then.
Yeah.
The team gives Pauline drugs to keep her heart going.
If we do have to stay done. It's 300 mics per kilo.
Little
that we're
scratch in the
based
back of your
on,
hand,
not 30.
Pauline. There we go.
Per kilo for the adrenaline. So 1 mil. Yeah. So 1 mil's equivalent to 0.1 mic. Yeah.
Now that she's stable, Pauline is ready to go back to St Mary's intensive care unit. St Mary's Hospital in London treats more children with meningococcal disease than any other unit in Britain. Since the paediatric intensive care unit was opened in 1992, there has been a 5-fold increase in the survival rate.
Because of the amount of research into the disease, we know so much, we understand so much more of the pathophysiology of the disease. On one level, that makes us feel so much better looking after the disease. But on another level, in spite of all this huge leap forward in our understanding of the pathophysiology, we still, unfortunately, will lose a subset of children who have the severest form of the disease.
5 hours after the team went out, Pauline is brought back to St Mary's intensive care.
Yeah, thanks for bringing around.
You all right, my dear?
Yeah,
Starving.
The retrieval team sometimes struggles to keep up. This winter, the number of cases is the highest it's been for 50 years.
The team has just got back from High Wycombe with another child with meningococcal disease. So we should hope to leave from here within the hour.
Can we just switch the lights off? Nikki, can you just hit the lights?
I just need to know from the nurse and from Ivan how much time Ivan needs to turn around.
Okay, Pauline, just put me onto another bed. Ready? On 3 again, ready? 1, 2, 3. Up, that's it.
We need to anesthetize this child urgently. Crash bleep your anesthetist, and I'll speak to your anesthetist when the anesthetist arrives. Okay? No, ask them to call me on this direct line.
Pauline is now stable enough for the team to answer another call-out.
We've corrected the amount of fluid they've given based on her weight, which we actually measured her at 70.
What kind of lines have you got, Ivan?
Right femoral, triple lumen, and a right arterial line, and a couple of peripherals.
Nice one.
Okay.
All the best for this one.
Now, 2 aren't too bad, one after the other. It's when you get the third one that can be a bit tiring. Still plenty of time in this 24 hours to get a third one.
In Britain, most meningococcal disease is caused by 2 types of bacteria, B and C. They're equally deadly. Although Pauline has been vaccinated, it only protected her from type C.
And I gather she had a vaccine recently against meningococcal disease. Was the whole school vaccinated?
I don't know, her class certainly. I think probably
Was
her.
this because there was an outbreak there, or was
No,
it
I
just
think
part
this
of
is just an ongoing.
Right.
Doing routine.
So it's possible what Pauline has is the other group that we often see in the UK, which is Group B. So unfortunately, there isn't a vaccine for Group B. The plan for her is for us to support every system in her body. So, what we're going to try and do is try and return each system's function to normal. So, keep the blood pressure up, keep the heart rate at the right rate. It's unfortunately not something that we can treat very quickly. I guess as her family, you're going to ask me, Joseph, is she likely to come through? And if she does come through, is she likely to have problems like deafness and brain damage, because the disease can do that. Let me say at the outset that fortunately Pauline has so far a mild version of meningococcal disease.
Once you've got the rash, it's not too late then?
93% of all children with meningococcal disease have the rash. Sometimes the rash can look like an overripe banana with the little blotches joining up, becoming confluent and covering the hands and feet. And sometimes if the rash is severe, it can compromise blood supply to the hands and feet. But that isn't the case with her.
No, she just had 2 places.
I saw that. I've had a look at her rash. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a very severe form of the rash, which again augurs well for her. Okay, so hang in there.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Pauline was well enough to go home after 4 days, but not everyone is so fortunate.
I've had recently, over the last few weeks, 4 children, 2 of them teenagers who've died from Group C meningococcal disease. And I feel it's going to be particularly hard for the parents to live with the fact that if their children had perhaps the benefit of the vaccine, which is, as we speak, being introduced across the country, then the outcome might have been quite different. I think that's going to be difficult for these families to live with.
Wide, big R. And say R. R. That's very good.
Meningococcal bacteria are unique to humans. They live in the back of the throat and are passed around through coughing, sneezing, and kissing. At any one time, 1 in 10 of us is carrying the bacteria, but it comes and goes without anyone knowing they've had it.
Open wide, say R. Thank you very much indeed.
Most of us will carry the dangerous bacteria at some point in our lives, but few of us will develop meningococcal disease because we've built up immunity. Why some of us get the disease and not others is a mystery.
Hi there, you come for the vaccination?
Some people are more at risk than others. Children under 5 because they're still building up resistance, and more surprisingly, teenagers.
Well done, thanks very much.
It's been found that as many as 3 in 10 adolescents carry the bacteria. Why there are so many is not really understood.
Can you fill in your form?
Perhaps there's something in the teenage lifestyle. These are some of the questions this major new research project hopes to answer.
Stuff about our household and where we live.
How many people live in your household? And what's the total number of rooms in your house?
How many days in the last week have you visited a pub or a nightclub? And the last one asks how many people have you kissed in the last week?
And obviously one of the questions that gets a lot of interest from the teenagers is when you ask them, you know, how many people they've kissed. But kissing is thought possibly to be one way in which the bacterium can be transmitted among groups.
The research is being conducted on teenagers who have come in for the new vaccine against type C meningococcal disease.
Okay, can you just sit back in the chair?
Does it really hurt, by the way?
It's only a little pinprick and you've had your ears done, so it's nothing like that.
Your age group is perceived as being one of the higher risk age groups, that's why you're getting it first. From the 29th, babies get it as well, who are the next highest risk age group. So, and then ultimately, everybody under the age of 18 will be given. No, in fact, your age groups are sort of the highest risk. But that's why you've got the vaccine.
So this is only going to cover you against meningitis C, which means you must still remain vigilant against other strains of meningitis, most notably B. Okay?
It's a professional living in the backs of our throats, and part of that professionalism is to avoid our immune system. We have still got a way to go to really understand how the organism evades the immune system, and we have to catch up. Evolution has enabled the meningococcus to develop a lot of very complex and interesting strategies, which we're only just beginning to understand.
The meningococcal bacteria is a complex and varied organism. There are 5 types that cause disease, each defined by its unique outer coat. For reasons that scientists don't understand, different parts of the world see different types.
In most of the developed world, the Group B and Group C organisms are the commonest causes of the disease, whereas in Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, Group A is a huge public health problem causing mass epidemics. And there are less common strains, Y and W135, but they account for only a very small proportion of the cases.
That's it. Done. Thanks. Was it as bad as your ears pierced?
No, not at all.
The new vaccine should eliminate the C bacteria from the throats of these teenagers. What is unclear is whether this will have a knock-on effect and increase the numbers of B bacteria.
Right, left and right-handed?
It's the bacteria's ability to change its outward appearance that worries Martin Maiden.
The slight concern is that meningococci can actually change these coats from B to C or C to B, and this has happened on a number of occasions in the past. So we're very interested in this study to check that that doesn't happen as part of the response of the meningococcal population to the vaccination programme. So we'll come back next year and probably the year after and see how the population of meningococci have been affected, if at all, by the vaccination programme.
It's type B that is responsible for 6 out of 10 cases in Britain. Six-month-old Faye Schreier is critical with advanced meningococcal septicemia caused by the B bacteria.
Now, you said she was a bit groggy on Sunday.
Yeah, and then about, what was it, about 6 o'clock, we noticed a bit of a rash.
It's because we've all had flu, and we thought
So you thought she had flu?
We thought she had flu, yeah, and saw the mark on her head.
And as I turned around, she had that come up.
Right. What did you think of that rash?
That was worrying, yeah. Her mum said just get her straight to the hospital, but we both knew anyway.
So you took her to your local hospital?
Yeah.
King George's,
Yeah. Well, I think you did the right thing, because a lot of parents, even today, quite reasonably would think the child is ill, has got a fever and has flu-like symptoms. And sometimes the rash isn't very obvious, and even if you see it, if you don't know what that rash means, you might think it's a bruise, and that's the commonest description that we've had. Very lucky for her that you recognise this for what it is, because she is one of the illest patients that we've ever treated.
It's only recently that doctors have been able to understand the chain of events that makes children like Faye so ill. As soon as the meningococcal bacteria entered Faye's bloodstream, unleashing a trail of blebs, her body sensed the threat. White blood cells, the hunter-killers of the immune system, locked onto the bacteria. As the white blood cells engulf the bacteria, they come into contact with poisonous endotoxin. The endotoxin causes the white cells to release chemicals that makes the blood vessel walls sticky. The white blood cells then stick to the walls of the blood vessels, leaving a trail of damage. Gradually, this process strips away the lining of the blood vessels, destroying special proteins that stop the blood from clotting. As the damage increases, the vessel wall breaks up and pieces fall off. The blood's repair cells, called platelets, rush to try and plug up the damaged areas. More platelets attach themselves to the white blood cells. Clots begin to form because the proteins that prevent clotting have all been destroyed. Within minutes, the small blood vessels of the body are blocked up and the surrounding tissue dies. The damaged blood vessel starts to disintegrate and leak. Blood and other fluids hemorrhage into the surrounding tissue. This is what causes the distinctive rash that appears beneath the skin. Every blood vessel throughout the body, every vital organ from the heart to the liver, is damaged.
The trunk is not affected too badly, but unfortunately her extremities have been affected. So all of this is dead skin because of the veins having had thrombosis in them, and you can see that these blisters are developing just like dead skin after a burn. The right leg is affected as well. All this skin here is going to come off, and there's going to be fresh skin underneath it. Sometimes they do a little bit of skin grafting with plastic surgery, but I'm afraid the tips of the toes are rather...
So what is it, just the tips?
Yeah, can you feel the black bits there?
Faye is likely to lose some of her fingers and all her toes.
No, they don't feel real, do they? Exactly, yes, you used the right word. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about that, and she won't feel any pain or anything. She won't actually have any sensation in her toes. And the best thing for us to do is to leave those well alone and not to interfere with them, because the rest of her body is getting better. Her organs are mending one by one. The heart's improved, the lungs have improved. And in most cases, if the patient survives, they survive and do well, and they're not brain damaged. So I think for the first time, I can give you some news that is making you smile. But we've got a long way to go. I mean, I think this is like the shock we had on the first few days of telling you all about things. This is the first bit of good news I've been able to tell you. How are you both?
Right. Getting there.
The difficulty of finding a vaccine to protect against bee disease has led doctors to search for new treatments. St Mary's Hospital is collaborating on a major research project that started thousands of miles away in Dallas, Texas. They're trying a new way to combat the deadly effects of endotoxin.
We had a very severe outbreak of disease here in the North Texas area. We were getting often several patients a day with fulminant meningococcal sepsis into our ICU. And of course, we, like everyone else, did the best we could with conventional care, but that only got us so far.
By the time 8-year-old Wanisha Taylor got to hospital, endotoxin had already inflicted serious damage.
Do you remember where it is?
I know it's down there.
Oh, you're so smart. Oh, man. We're oh. That's why you always need to look where you're going.
Oh, look where I'm going.
Did it fit?
Yeah.
Very good.
Like their colleagues in Britain, the Dallas doctors found that advances in conventional medicine could save more lives, but could do nothing to prevent the loss of limbs in their patients.
We've always had the dilemma, how could a disease be so bad and kill so many children and adults and leave many children and adults maimed? How can it be so bad when we know that the bacteria that causes it is so very susceptible to antibiotics?
There you go, you did it.
And really, my research is focused on answering that question. Why can it be so bad despite the fact that it's so easy to kill the bacteria?
Although many bacteria produce endotoxin, the levels produced by the meningococcal bacteria can be 100 to 1,000 times greater than any other bacterial disease. Brett Giroir's research has focused on the direct effects of endotoxin on the body. Using a rat's heart that is being kept artificially alive, he studies how endotoxin causes damage.
We're infusing the heart with endotoxin in just about the quantities that a patient with meningococcal sepsis would have. And we're able to see the ability of that heart to beat is actually tremendously reduced. And this is exactly what we see in children with meningococcal sepsis, that not only does fluid leak out of their blood vessels, not only do they have clots within their blood vessels, but their heart does not function very well, and actually their heart fails. And this is a main contributor to some of the death we see early with meningococcal sepsis.
If doctors could block the release of endotoxin, it would be a major breakthrough which would limit the most devastating effects of the disease. Brett has spent the last 7 years researching a drug that might do this. He looked to the body's defense mechanisms for the answer.
What we became interested in is a compound called bactericidal permeability increasing protein, or BPI for short. This is an exact copy of a normal natural protein, and that's found in your white blood cells, your infection-fighting cells. Not only does BPI kill bacteria, but it completely binds and neutralizes endotoxin, the primary toxin that we think is the bad player in meningococcal sepsis.
To carry out drug trials on BPI, Brett enlisted the help of St Mary's and other hospitals with large numbers of cases. The results aren't known yet, but Brett remains optimistic.
What is so exciting about BPI is, especially in infectious diseases, it's something else aside from killing the bacteria and supporting the body functions. This is actually doing something that will make the patient get better much more rapidly by blocking the toxins that are really poisoning the body.
Until the results of the BPI clinical trials are known, Doctors at St Mary's have to treat patients like Faye Schreier as best they can. It's a month since Faye was admitted to intensive care.
There was a time when I did honestly think she weren't going to make it. I looked at her and I see her 3 times her size. And like the marks on her body and how bad she was and the machines around her. And I just didn't think she would. She's pulled right through like the worst stage of it, the meningococcal. And she's off all the machines, as you can see. But she's still on the morphine, which she's finding it hard to do without, so they've got to wean her off of that. What they're saying is that at the moment, they can save her thumb here. They've also said that any fingers that have got the scabbing down one side, they'll remove that and then they'll take skin from her thigh and make the rest of the finger up with it. So hopefully, like, she's not going to lose all of them, but it's definitely she's going to lose some of them. But like I said, we don't know how much, and we won't know until they drop off, which is going to be a long wait. Sometimes I think about her future and boyfriends and things like that, but I don't want to let it bother me because there's too much going on now.
Because meningococcal bacteria spread so rapidly, it limits the effectiveness of any new treatment. What's needed is a vaccine for meningococcal B to prevent the onset of the disease in the first place. There are vaccines for 4 of the 5 types of meningococcal bacteria that cause disease. The one that has eluded scientists so far is type B. It's type B that is responsible for most of the cases in Britain and the rest of Europe, and it's on the increase in the United States as well. But nowhere is the need for a vaccine more urgent than in New Zealand. The country is in the middle of a serious epidemic with the highest rate of bee disease in the Western world. In the last 10 years, there has been a 12-fold increase in the number of cases. As in Britain, the victims are mostly under 5 years old. And here, it's the Maori and Pacific Island children living in South Auckland who are most affected. What worries scientists is that outbreaks like this can occur anywhere, any time. No one knows why. The sudden rise in cases took the New Zealand health authorities by surprise. Wendy Walker is head of the children's unit at the Middlemore Hospital in South Auckland. People who live in this area are 5 times more likely to get the disease than other New Zealanders.
So we don't really know what's causing this. Malu, first name's Malu? Yeah. Right, here we are.
Jane Perry's daughter Malu has been brought in with breathing difficulties and a rash.
It's fantastic this morning, doesn't she? When it's really bad in our peak season in the middle of winter, we're getting about 3 to 4 a week, perhaps. And we've got one very famous hour where we had 3 cases in 1 hour. They're definitely non-blanching, but they're quite sort of red. When I was a registrar working in the old children's hospital, I didn't ever see a case of this disease. So it really is something that, you know, we have had to develop an expertise over a fairly short period of time.
Jane Perry is worried because already during this epidemic, both her other children have had meningococcal disease.
She's got a nasty ulcerated pharyngitis. So this is a viral thing, okay? Yeah, and I think that's why she's got the ulcers and the spots. She does not have meningitis. That's good. Yeah, okay, so she doesn't have the meningococcal bug in her blood, okay? We've had some children who have actually come in looking really well and then just deteriorate and crash out in front of our eyes. That's devastating for a family because they think that when they get to a hospital that everything's going to be okay and that everything's going to be done. And then to have a child deteriorate in hospital is devastating for families and staff.
What about O?
O for orange.
Oh, just write
S.
The epidemic has left many children severely disabled.
B for what?
B for Barney.
Good boy.
E.
The doctors couldn't prevent Barney from losing his right hand, the fingers on his left, and both his feet.
Barney.
Good boy. But lucky my son, the brain's all right.
I've got two.
Just only the skin, you know. Covered the whole body, you know.
Barney's rash started with a small spot on his forehead and quickly spread to cover his whole body.
The minute does, you know, go quickly, you know. If you can't take your son quickly at the hospital, he's gonna be died at time.
2, 3, 4.
But lucky my son, I'm just happy, and they took him to the hospital that night time. But now he's alive here. Of course, I love you. My gosh.
Children are dying. Children are going through terrible illnesses and having outcomes such as Barney. And a number of children are having to come into hospital. This is an incredibly significant epidemic for us.
There's no sign of the epidemic disappearing. This 18-month-old Tongan boy is the latest casualty. On the Pacific Islands, the disease is almost unheard of. But for Pacific Island children born in New Zealand, it's a very different story.
A Pacific Island child born in Auckland has a 1 in 100 chance of contracting meningococcal disease in his or her first year of life. And that's 25% of Auckland's birth rate on an annual basis. So, I mean, 1 in 100 chance for a child in a family of getting meningococcal disease in that first year of life is extraordinary.
Researchers found that nearly all cases came from the most densely populated suburbs of Auckland, where many Maori and Pacific Island families are sharing houses because of economic pressures.
In the early 90s was a significant change in housing policy, which resulted in a number of families moving in together, gross overcrowding, so 12, 15 people in a 2 to 3 bedroomed house.
Although it's difficult to say cause and effect, it seems very likely that people were crowded together and have shared the infectious organism.
We see it in army camps, in university student dormitories. So any situation which brings large numbers of people together, particularly in crowded environments, may enable strains which some people are not immune to become prevalent in that community, and that you can get an outbreak of the disease.
The cause of the outbreak may be unclear, but what's certain is that a vaccine could bring it to an end. New Zealand, like Britain, is urgently looking for a vaccine against type B disease. Vaccines against other types of meningococcal disease have been developed by incorporating the bacteria's outer coat. This is a normal way of triggering the body's immune response. But the B type has evolved a unique outer coat that makes this approach impossible.
The coating of the group B meningococcus is identical in its structure to the coating of some of the cells within the human brain. And this has been really an extremely clever strategy of the meningococcus. By covering itself in molecules which are identical to molecules within the human body, the immune system is fooled into not recognizing the bacteria. It's almost the Trojan horse sort of strategy.
Any vaccine produced from this outer coat wouldn't work. The immune system would either ignore it or start attacking the body's own cells. And there's a further problem. There are hundreds of strains of type B. While some countries have managed to tailor vaccines for their own strain, there's no vaccine which works for all strains of type B. Scientists are searching for a component of the B bacteria that is common to all strains, which could then be used to make this elusive universal vaccine. At St Mary's Hospital in London, doctors have turned to the survivors of the disease, believing they may hold the key to the problem.
How do you feel generally?
I feel better.
Yeah.
I'm more energetic now.
Yeah.
I can get up in the morning. I do get tired a little bit.
17-year-old Amy Mansell had type B meningococcal disease just 8 months ago. She's come for a checkup with consultant Simon Nadell and will give blood for a new research project.
And this
finger?
finger?
That one, it seems to be going back on its own, but they're going to encourage it and just cut it.
He's going to do a release.
He's just going to, release that, and then he's going to extend this thumb.
Okay.
There.
So you can use it.
Grip.
Yeah.
Just a bit of a grip. But I was very upset. I was worried about the way I looked because my hands, I think they were the first things I noticed. I thought I'd been in a fire accident and I'd burnt my hands. That was the worst. That was,
Okay.
But it's just that bone there. This one's, I think, the best out of the two. I've still got, like, stitches, just two there.
So you're waiting for them to come out?
Yeah, they're coming out on their own, really.
Yeah.
There was quite a few.
And they don't hurt?
No, I think the only one that hurts is...
Just across the top?
It's just here.
They look like they're healing up really well.
And they're getting a bit hairy.
Put the socks back on.
Yeah, quite hairy.
Amy will have developed antibodies, which should protect her from ever getting the same strain of B disease again. But the research team want to know if she could also be immune to other strains.
This research, which is nearing completion, has, I think, given us a definite answer. And that answer is that a child who has had the disease, even if they're less than a year of age, will develop a change in immunity against not only the strain of the bacteria which caused their disease, but against many other different strains of meningococcus.
Perhaps there is one molecule common to all strains of type B that could trigger protective antibodies if included in a vaccine. This is one of many approaches to making a universal B vaccine. Survivors are keen to help, in the hope that one day the terrible consequences of this disease will be eradicated.
It's devastating. It's absolutely devastating. I mean, you know, she's got very good spirits, etc., but her life has been torn apart, basically. I think we're getting much better at managing getting children over the initial period when their body completely fails. So we're getting much better at that, and we are seeing many more children who are surviving the initial phase who end up with serious long-term effects.
Yeah, just follow me with the wheelchair, and you just be careful.
Most doctors fear that a vaccine for all strains of meningococcal B could be at least 5 to 10 years away.
You've got to give me a massive hug. Oh, excellent! Oh, fantastic. Oh, I want to cry. Oh.
You don't really rest the way because you
Go on.
You're right.
How long have you had them? Since yesterday.
No way! Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Well done. That's so good. I'm going to have to sit down now.
Chariot is behind you. See, the driver's a bit slow.
Driver's talk.
Right behind you. Oh, you put your hand down. Hey. Oh, well done. Oh, well done.
Yeah.